Hi there everybody, it's Chris again from Haunted Earth. What I'd like to discuss with you very briefly, I hope, is the phenomenon of orbs. Now, as you're aware, for the last few months I've been making deliberate attempts to contact orbs as spiritual entities by talking to them directly and getting them to reciprocate by appearing before me. Now, as you're aware, on YouTube, as I've indicated, I've been extremely successful in this endeavour. So what I want to do is to cover to you what I believe an orb actually is and what it represents, and how you too can achieve the same results as me. I believe that the human body is merely a machine, and that when the machine ceases to function, the controlling element, the soul, or whatever you want to describe it, departs from the body and moves over to another plane or another existence. A little bit like the caterpillar that metamorphosizes into a butterfly. We move from one level of existence to another level. A lot of people, particularly skeptics, are convinced that orbs in the main are merely dust. They often quote scientific opinion, but the scientific research that I've actually read doesn't actually address the issues which I think are important, and that is communication. I believe that they are a sentient life form, and surprisingly for some I can actually tell the difference between what I would consider to be dust motes, water vapour or insects. A particular area that I've conducted my experiments has been in the master bedroom of my own home, which although built in the 1950s actually crosses the site of an earlier property. And it's in that room that I believe I have a spiritual portal or doorway which allows elements from both properties to enter into the bedroom. So I'm actually making communication with spiritual entities which could range back as far as 300 years. The most common spiritual manifestation in my own home is that of a young girl. She once lived here but died unfortunately a number of years ago and comes back here in visitation. I also know that she follows me around the house because I've left camcorders in different parts of the home, and as I walk past, her orb element has followed behind me. So I'm quite convinced that orbs are spiritual entities. So what I decided to do was to sit there very quietly and talk to them and gradually build up a rapport or trust. Because remember, although they are in spirit, they're just as frightened of us in our world as we are of them. So fear is key here, and trust. And if you practice hard enough, you can achieve the same results as me. Another point I get from viewers concerning orbs is why are they in different shapes and sizes, and indeed in different colours? Well, again, this mirrors the world that we exist in here. There are large people and there are small people, as well as of course people of different colours. So it really doesn't make any difference whether the orb energy you're dealing with is red, blue, green, purple or black. It doesn't mean to say that the darker it is, the more evil it is. I firmly believe that the colours have got no bearing whatsoever on mood or temperament. Another question that's posed by people is why don't orbs transmute into full-bodied apparitions or partial-bodied apparitions? Well, the truth is that for them to generate enough energy to do it is extremely difficult. And I found that in houses where the energy has, shall we say, a very strong emotion attached to it, that is more likely to make a manifestation of that degree than one that is content and happy. I mean, I can recall a few years back in one particular property, I saw this entity on numerous occasions throughout the investigation, initially as an orb which was over 2 foot in diameter and could be seen through the naked eye, to the shadows and a full-bodied apparition. So it rather varies, I think, on the temperament of the entity that you're making communication with. I would strictly advise anyone who wants to try this themselves to make sure they feel comfortable in the environment that they work in. If they're in a location which feels very unpleasant and very uncomfortable, my advice would be don't do it, because no doubt you are actually trying to interact with something which is perhaps evil. Are orbs demons is another question, particularly posed by some of our religious viewers. My answer to that is no. As I've said to you about shapes and colours, it also reflects on temperament. In this world there are some very evil people, and when they die that evilness doesn't depart from their body or their soul, it remains with them. So if you're interacting with something which you believe is demonic, you're probably interacting with someone who was evil, as well of course those that are good. So there are spirits of course that walk in light and those that stand in darkness. So if you're not happy, as I've said, about any particular location, don't do it. Always carry out a protection exercise, which I've covered in my earlier video, and you should be safe during any subsequent investigation. But as I've said, it's all about trust, and it's how you address them. Ask them who they are, ask them to show themselves, ask if they have a message. In my own home, the experience simply is to ask them to show themselves and then to try and identify who they are and ask them to appear again and interact. I produced a number of videos where I've even invited a skeptic to join me, which in this case was my own brother, and he was absolutely mortified by the experience. But whether it's changed his viewpoint, I don't know. I've also used cats, and of course I've received severe criticism for using animals. But there you go, you have to try different mediums. But in every medium that I've tried, I've shown that you can communicate with them. I can do this at any location, anywhere on this planet. I think you have to have an open mind. I think you have to have a warm spirit. And I think that you have to have a psychic ability to open yourself up sufficiently for them to make communication with you. I've seen a number of TV programs which people often quote, such as Ghost Hunters or Most Haunted. They say that orbs are dust, etc., etc. But tell me this, on any of those programs, do you ever see any team member actually doing what I'm doing, by talking to them, by trying to get them to react to you? The answer simply is no. Because it's made for TV and because it has to be fitted into a particular slot and they've got only so long to film, no one's going to bother to do that. Instead, they're looking for EVP or chairs being thrown across the room, etc., etc. But I can tell you this, that on any subsequent investigation that I've ever made, the orb has always been a precursor to any kind of spiritual activity, such as EVP, such as people being pushed, or people being overshadowed by spiritual energies. All this kind of weird and wonderful phenomena is normally precursored by the appearance of an orb energy. Another question about orbs. In one location you can take a photograph and there could be 30 orbs in that one photo. Does that mean to say that there are 30 spirits gathered there? The answer is no. What I've discovered is that the orb is an expanding consciousness. As it moves into a room and as it spreads itself out further, it generates more and more orbs as its conscious expands. So that when you're actually sat there and you're videoing and you pick up a number of orb elements, it normally leads to only one spiritual entity. And there's another weird thing as well. Mostly when you're interacting with orbs, it's always with one spirit at a time. Very rarely do you get two or three interacting with you at the same time. So I believe firmly that perhaps in their world, as in our world, they're just as fearful of other spiritual entities as they are of us. Another point to bear in mind as well is that when you're investigating, you often feel coldness building up in the atmosphere. And if you've got a laser thermometer, you can measure it and you can see a temperature drop. Why is that? Well, simply the orb is a cold energy. And as the orb or spiritual entity comes into the location, the obvious conclusion will be coldness in the atmosphere. So you will feel their presence around you. Okay, people say orbs are dust. If orbs were dust, why is it in my own home, which is very active, it has quiet periods too? So I can be in the haunted bedroom, for example, over a period of 3 or 4 days and capture nothing at all of any kind of spiritual anomaly. Yet on other occasions there's a lot of activity. Does the dust depart from the room over a period and come back at a later date? I think not. If dust was truly the root cause of this kind of apparition, then it would be present all the time, day or night, but it isn't. Many people observed, particularly from my videos, that when an orb enters into a room, A, it goes normally directly towards me, and B, it moves across the carpet. Well, to answer A, that's a reassurance that I am making a level of contact with a sentient life form. And why does it move across the carpet? If I can explain by example, a few years back I was working in a notoriously haunted location, and through the viewfinder of my camcorder I saw what appeared to be a pair of legs being constructed from a myriad of tiny white bright dots. Now I could quite clearly see the outline of the trousers, the turn-ups at the bottom and the shoes, but when it got to the knees it could not sustain the energy anymore, and the whole apparition just broke up and collapsed. When I reviewed the videotape thinking I've got something very exciting, what I discovered were two orbs shooting up from the floor. What I think that when you see them walking across or moving across the carpet, shall we say, I think that attached to that, and I have seen it on one or two occasions, the outline of a person, actually from the point of the orb. So the orb is the point of presence. So as it moves across the carpet, it's actually a spiritual entity which could be, in their own eyes, in human form, walking towards you. Now, please believe me, you have nothing to fear. If you carry out protection exercise before you start, and if you meditate and you open yourself up to the experience, you will learn a lot more. But if you're a skeptic and you simply don't believe in this, or you refuse to believe in this, then there is nothing I can do to assist or guide you. All I ask is for you, the YouTube viewer, to have an